All right, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Diana Wynand. I'm the chair of the San Fernando Valley Climate Reality Chapter. It's very good to have you all with us tonight. We are part of the larger organization, which you'll learn a little bit more about tonight, called Climate Reality Project. But the way we always like to start our meetings is to share a land acknowledgement about where we are here. And we take turns doing that. And tonight we're very happy to have Zena Block. Zena does our newsletters. Zena, what we're going to do, I'll share my screen. And Zena will read why we do this and then the land acknowledgement itself. Zena, go ahead.
A land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous people as stewards of this land and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous people and their traditional territories. It acknowledges the history that has brought us to reside on this land, the colonialism that is present in our current systems, and calls on us to be mindful of our own present participation in it. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Tongva, the Quiche, the Tataviam, and the Chumash tribes.
Thank you very much, Zena, and thank you for the work you do on preparing the newsletters for us. Really appreciate it. Great. Well, we did say we wanted to let you know about climate reality, so I want to turn it over to Vivian Deutsch. She is our outreach coordinator, and she's going to introduce you to the mothership, Climate Reality Project, and tell you how you can get more involved. And while you do that, go ahead, Vivian, and I might share my screen to share where people can find more information.
So welcome, everybody. Just for people that don't know, people are on our mailing list, but they don't realize that we're actually a chapter of this giant worldwide organization, Climate Reality Project, that was started by Al Gore. And it's everywhere in the world, and it's does amazing things all over the world, including in our country, of course. And so when you're on our mailing list, doesn't necessarily make you a member of Climate Reality, but there's a really simple way that you can just click, and then you are now with us, members of the larger Climate Reality, which you can share our pride, first of all, in being part of that. And then you also will get communications from them about things that they are doing. And periodically they have trainings that are completely free. The people on our leadership team, we've all done those trainings. You don't have to do the training to be members of our chapter, but they are amazing, absolutely amazing. So that's another thing that you become eligible for when you're a member. Great. So there's a quick link to just click and fill out a little form, and it doesn't cost money. Nobody's going to come after you for money. This is completely free. It's more like an honor and getting plugged into more ways to work on the environment if you want to. And also visibility to the stuff that's going on. So Diana, do you have the link to put in the chat?
I do. Just put that in there. And okay. Great introduction. All right, I'm so excited about our program tonight. I'm going to turn it over to the person who has put this program together, Cheryl Cuneo. Cheryl, thank you so much. You've been working really hard to tie all of this together, and thank you for bringing this to us. I know this is near and dear to your heart, so please share. We're going to close the chat while we start the program, and we'll open it back up for Q&A after our guests have spoken. And I'm also going to pin you guys as you speak. So Cheryl, go ahead.
Okay. Hi. Let's start. The fashion industry is an important part of the world economy and employs over 75 million people worldwide, but it is also responsible for between 8 and 10% of world carbon emission, uses 93 billion cubic meters of water annually, and is responsible for as much as 20% of wastewater pollution. Around 60% of all materials used are made from plastic. The microplastics released into the ocean yearly from washing our clothes amounts to the equivalent of 50 billion plastic bottles, and the equivalent of one garbage truck full of clothes is burned or dumped in the landfill every second. Clearly, this is a problem. We all wear clothes, and like it or not, our clothing choices speak to who we are as communities and as individuals. So what can be done about the problem? Tonight, we have two pioneers in efforts to transition towards sustainability and change in the way the fashion industry works. Our first speaker's focus is on waste from clothing manufacturers, and our second speaker is exploring the circular economy and ways to creatively extend the lifespan of clothing that we own. So first, our first speaker is Jessica Schreiber, the founder and CEO of Fab Scrap, a New York-based nonprofit that does pickup and recycling of excess fabric from fashion manufacturers. Before launching Fab Scrap, Jessica worked for the Bureau of Recycling and Sustainability at the New York City Department of Sanitation. Several fashion brands asked how they could recycle their excess fabric, which inspired her to create a solution for fashion's textile waste problem. And she's calling in from New York and stayed up late for us. Thank you so much, Jessica. Is there anything more you should say about you?
No, I think that was a great introduction. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you everybody for having me and for all of the leadership acts that you guys put in the chat was really inspiring. And so that was like nice to see, a good way to start the year. I'm going to share screen and go through a few slides just to give, hoping, there we go. Give you guys a sort of outline about how Fab Scrap works and the work that we do and how I got started in that. The mission of Fab Scrap as a nonprofit organization is to end commercial textile waste. We're doing that as a convenient and transparent service, an affordable and accessible materials resource, and as a community of change makers. So really resonated with everything you guys are talking about. I'll tell you a little bit about our organization, then go through a few of the questions I receive most often, and then I'm excited to answer your questions too. That's usually my favorite part of presentations. So just to clarify, I worked at sanitation on residential waste, particularly New York City's clothing program. And that was all post-consumer waste generated by us, by the public, by individuals, garments and household items that are used and then discarded or donated. But Fab Scrap moves to work with commercial entities, the pre-consumer waste that's generated by company in creating the products that we use. So fabric that's unused or left over, and it's the company's responsibility to discard or donate. This is New York City centric, forgive me, but in New York City, about 200,000 tons of clothing are discarded annually, and that's 14 times the weight of the Brooklyn Bridge, which is limestone and granite and steel cables. We are throwing out 14 Brooklyn bridges every year just in New York City. So it's a massive amount of waste going to landfill. And there's not really a good measure of commercial textile waste, particularly in New York City, but from what I understand in most cities, businesses are not beholden to the same waste laws that individuals are. For example, there are a lot of regulations about what we recycle and how and what can go curbside, but businesses don't have those same laws. The best estimate that I can find is that for every pound of waste we generate as an individual, the business created 40 pounds upstream. So potentially commercial waste is 40 times greater than that of residential and usually less regulated unless it's particularly toxic. So that's sort of where I wanted to focus when I realized the disparity there while I was at sanitation. So in looking at textile production, there's 53 million tons of fabric that's produced each year that's worldwide. About 97% of it comes from virgin feedstock, and it's used for clothing production. About 12% gets lost just in the design and production stage. The rest gets used, but as was mentioned earlier, we have some microfiber leakage. And then after use, right now, currently, about 75% gets landfilled or incinerated. Very little gets recovered for reuse. which I hope Karri can talk about. But I want to talk about the design waste, that 12% that's wasted before clothing even gets sold. What we found, about 75% of the millions of pounds that we've collected are fabric samples called headers. Mills cut 6x6-inch squares of fabric. They'll staple it to a cardboard piece that has all of the information about the fabric and kind of send these indiscriminately to brands so that they can see all of the new fabrics for the season. Brands might use 2 or 3 and then they discard the rest. So it's marketing expense for the mills, but it's a lot of waste for the brands. This is about 75% of what we're seeing in the commercial waste stream. Then we'll see some cuttings. If they do like a fabric swatch, they'll usually ask for 2 to 4 yards of sample yardage. So we'll see a bit of sample yardage and cuttings. We also have found that a lot of mills have pretty high minimums. And so for small brands, if there's a fabric you're in love with, you often have to over order just to get the fabric that you want. So if there's extra fabric, we see that in the waste stream too. This one was really surprising to me when I first started, but there is a lot of mock-up garments that happen as part of the design process. You'll see notes that go between design and production about how to change seams or how to change some of the dyes, the construction, the hems. And so we'll get these mock-up pieces as part of the waste stream. And then little bits that are cut out, you know, if you've cut from a fabric, it's not like cookie dough. You can't roll up those excess pieces and reuse it. All of those little bits of fabric that are cut from the pattern are usually wasted as well. So Fab Scrap is hoping to intervene in this process. Admittedly, it's pretty niche and very behind the scenes, but if you look at the total amount of fabric wasted, and it's maybe 12%, but out of 53 million tons, that does add up pretty quick. So what we do is offer a pickup service from design offices in New York City. We track everything that we pick up for the brands so they get data on their waste. We have a team of volunteers who helps us sort it, and then we have a shop where everything that's reusable can be redistributed. So I'll go into those a little bit. We provide our partner brands with bags that they fill. Black bags let us know it's proprietary and can't be reused. Brown bags mean we can reuse it if possible. Right now we're picking up about 7,000 pounds a week. It's only pre-consumer. We don't pick up post-consumer material, but we do provide the transportation. Like I said, all of the data, companies usually only wait 3 or 4 days before pickup. And this is what their data looks like when we send it to them every year. Their name would be at the top with their total weight for the year and their total overall since starting service. One of the things that I am really proud of is the structure of Fab Scrap that charges brands for this. I think in general, there's this conception that if it's textile material, it's a donation. When 75% of what we're picking up are those 6x6-inch swatches, that's not really reusable material. And I know reusable is subjective, and yes, you can technically make something out of 6-inch swatches, but when you're picking up millions and millions of them by volume, that does become a waste issue. And so we want the brands to fund the infrastructure that solves this problem. So the same way that a company would pay for trash pickup or paper recycling or metal, glass, and plastic, we're asking brands pay for this textile waste. And that's a real reframing for them, that this is a waste stream and not a donation. But it does help the industry be more accountable for creating the infrastructure to solve its problems. So the volunteer piece, if it's brown material, not proprietary, our warehouse is open to the public and volunteers can come in and help us sort it. We have to remove staples and buttons, hardware, zippers, stickers, tape, etc. And so volunteers do that. And as a thank you, they get to take home 5 pounds of fabric for free. So we get a lot of, I'm going to skip through some of the details here. We get a lot of fashion students and artists and crafters who come to help us sort. They get a bunch of free material for their classes or their new brands or their Etsy stores or their quilting projects, and it helps us move through material. And really what we're doing is more downcycling than recycling, but all of those scraps get sent to a shredder. We're working with a shredder in South Carolina, and it's used in a few different industrial places. The automotive industry is number one, but here at U-Haul, I saw moving blankets that were made out of the recycled fabrics. It's used in furniture, it's used in carpet padding and insulation, mattress stuffing. So definitely downcycling. I have not seen any tech ready to turn fabric back into fabric at scale yet. I'm hoping that we can get there and provide feedstock for them, but right now the majority of what we're doing is downcycling, except for what we get that's reusable. And this is the fun part. About 40% of what we receive, we keep for reuse. And we have two warehouses that have reuse rooms that act as like a fabric thrift store. And so lots of yardage, lots of cuttings, cones of yarn, buttons, zippers, leather skins. Really, if it's any usable size, we keep it and it's available to the public. And all of those mock-up garments we keep and have them as mendables. So we sell that by weight. If you can add a couple stitches or patch something, it's a never worn brand new sample garment. And we're working with about 800 brands in New York City. So there's sometimes some pretty couture stuff that comes through and is fun to fix up. We sell a few scraps too, lots and lots of trims. But yeah, the reuse part of what we're doing is really redistributing a lot of the weight. So like I said, we're at 800 total brands served. There's a list on our website if you're really curious who's part of that. But most of the clothing I wear, we work with those brands. We've had over 16,000 people come in and volunteer, lots of corporate groups and school groups. And then to date, we've saved 1.5 million pounds from landfill. One of the reasons this is so important, I think, when we talk about why we need to be keeping textiles from landfill is there's CO2 released in the production of fiber, in making the clothing and making the fabric, the microfibers when we wash it, and then the pollution, I guess, of shipping unused and discarded fabric all around the world. Really what we're hoping to do is use material that already exists and keep what is no longer usable out of our waterways and landfills. We tell people who shop with us that for every 10 pounds of fabric that you buy at Fab Scrap, it has the CO2 equivalent of planting a tree. And I believe most of that is because we're not creating new fabric, which is pretty intensive in either the oil use for polyester and synthetics or the land water use for our natural fibers. So this is the same graph as earlier, but I just want to end on a slightly more positive note that of the virgin feedstock, we do have a little bit of feedstock, recycled feedstock coming from other industries. Unfortunately, when I hear recycled fabric, more often than not, it's plastic water bottles into fabric than it is fabric into fabric. Like it shows here, this is less than 1%. And then, yeah, we're losing a little bit during the recycling process, but we're really hoping to intervene here and increase this amount. A little bit about what we've been working on. I know I'm slightly over time, but one of the things that we got a grant for last year was to actually audit all of the headers that we receive so that we can start to work with mills and find a better way for them to send samples to brands to reduce the waste from the source. So we have audited over 7,000 pounds of headers to talk about whether it's better to staple or tape or glue, to talk about the size of the fabric yield versus the paper that's discarded. Is it better to have a hang tag or not? And so we can start to make environmental recommendations to mills through their brands and hopefully push towards sample yardage, which can be reused. And then this past fall, we worked with Remake to sponsor the Fabric Act. I think this has been pretty successful in California already. You guys already may know more details about this than I do, but we went to DC. This really is to create some worker protections in apparel production, have workers make a minimum hourly wage and not a piece wage. which sometimes comes out to much, much less than the federal minimum. So quick shout out to our board and our team in Philadelphia and New York. We're doing a lot. We're moving thousands of pounds every week, and it's all happening with a pretty small team. We're a team of about 15 people. So a lot of movement and a lot of weight lifted by everyone on the team. These are the questions that I get most often. We're happy to answer these at the end too. But when I was first launching, people wanted to know why this wasn't a for-profit and how we're funded. I gave an example here. We're mostly self-funded with service fees and fabric sales. That was because I am not a great fundraiser. I don't like asking for money, but we are growing in that part through grants and donations, but mostly service fees and fabric sales to be self-sustaining as a new infrastructure piece in the industry. What advice you would give consumers, which I'm sure Karri will touch on too, and where we see the industry going. So that is Fab Scrap in a nutshell. I hope that kind of gives you a behind the scenes look at a very large but very hidden waste stream in the fashion industry. That was my info.
Thank you, Jessica. That was fascinating. Really, really interesting. So you can stay on and answer some questions afterwards.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Cheryl, you want to introduce our next guest?
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. And yes, some of those were our questions, or are our questions. Okay, so our next speaker is Karri Ann Frerichs, and she is the CEO and founder of Circular Fashion LA. She is a fashion industry entrepreneur and innovator. Her company's focus is on zero waste and regenerative product development. They tackle the problem of post-consumer clothing and textile waste, as well as overconsumption of natural resources by the fashion industry. Circular Fashion LA has been an active member of LA Clean Tech Incubator since 2021. We had LA Clean Tech people on for a meeting a while back. Did I miss anything, Karri?
That's great.
You're going to tell us.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Jessica, that was so informative. I didn't know the 1 pound, 40 pounds of the commercial waste. Wow. I actually have a I share a graphic with Jessica, but my presentation focuses more on the community in LA and how fast fashion brands really do affect us locally here in Los Angeles. So I'll go ahead and share that. This is a presentation I gave in August. Oops, get that out of the way there. Make sure you can see my screen there. When I hosted a demo event with the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance in Los Angeles, I gave this at a panel discussion there. But my focus then is it affects our local communities. So what can we do about it? So let's understand how it affects our communities. I think this community, this particular audience understands the problems. What hasn't been mentioned already is cotton is uses more pesticides than other crops. And so there's actually quite a bit of poisoning and death that occurs amongst cotton workers, not to mention the water pollution and et cetera. 20% of the water pollution, it's a top 5 industry for forced labor. How we get the cheap prices in fashion is only through exploitation and overproduction. Overproduction is the only way that you get these prices in fast fashion because it makes more sense to liquidate the product and make room for new products. And then we end up with nothing to wear here, and then it all goes to waste. This graph's familiar, but I like to say that the oil, cotton, trees, and animals, many people don't realize that fashion plays a huge role in global deforestation. Rayon and all the rayon derivatives is the fabric that comes from trees, and it's growing. The demand for it is growing because it's seen as more sustainable than cotton, but
when there's a 30% chance that the rayon that you're wearing came from endangered forests. So like Jessica of Fab Scrap focus on the pre-consumer, we focus on the post-consumer here. Can you see my cursor moving around as okay, perfect, thank you. And what's also mentioned is less than 1% closed recycling. This graph is back from 2017. So I believe that when a version of this graph comes out again in, let's say, 2022 data, this percentage, I hope and believe it'll jump up to like 3% maybe, because there is new technology coming on the market. There is more scale and there is a lot more investment going into the textile recycling. So I do hope that this number goes up, but nonetheless here, the 73% is, it's a product of fast fashion and it really doesn't have to be that way. So focusing in on Los Angeles, we here are the hub. If your clothes, and I know Jessica, New York may argue with us on this, and I think LA and New York goes back and forth, but this is the data that I have, that if your clothes say made in America, there's an 80% chance it is made here in Los Angeles. And so there's over 45,000 workers in the LA County area and just kind of broader Southern California that work in the garment industry. There's also at least 1,200 brands who are headquartered here in the LA area, and approximately 15 billion amount of apparel and textile products leaves LA annually. So this is a global hub. We pale in comparison, of course, to China and Bangladesh and those, but for the US, this is the hub. And these are a number of the brands who they may not manufacture here, but they do say that they are headquartered here. And I did put both sustainable brands and non-sustainable brands. And I have a little exercise here that's going to focus on this one here, Fashion Nova, which is a main competitor to Shein. And Shein is the elephant in the room. They're the they are doing some things, just like H&M is doing things, right? But they are doing things to combat the problems that they are causing. So I have a little exercise here on Fashion Nova. When I made this presentation in August, this was the very first garment that appeared on the site. But when I gave this presentation the first time, 3 days later, it was buried pages and pages down. So, but this item, this woven silk looking shirt, brand new on the site, was already on sale for $14. Okay. And this is a woven, which means it is, you have to cut and sew it. It requires cut, make, trim. And then if you look closely at it, there's at least, I am not 100% sure because I don't have the product, but there are at least 8 pattern pieces. There are buttons. There is elastic in the waistband here. I guarantee there's interfacing or fusing in the collar and the button plackets. And all of that has to be put together. It has to be pressed and labeled and packaged. And as much automation as in the industry nowadays, it still requires human hands and eyes to assemble these clothes. There's automation in cutting, there's automation in knitting, but it is absolutely human hands and eyes right now that are putting these clothes together. So if we break it down, I say a math game. Does it add up? So any product across the board, fashion in particular, but any product, you can kind of use this math scenario for anything. You take the retail price and you divide that by 3, and you take that price and you divide that by 3. And that is going to represent the absolute best case scenario, not the reality, but the best case possibility for what labor and materials, what money went in to pay labor and what money went in to pay materials. And you really have to ask yourself, if it feels too good to be true, it is too good to be true every single time. It is too good to be true. So if we look at this shirt, it's $14. You divide that by 3 because every single product includes the COGS, cost of goods sold, the business operations, and profit. And we don't know what the actual division is, but we can, unless they're on the board of Fashion Nova, but we'll just say divide by 3. So that means 466 goes into the materials, labor, and shipping combined, 466 into salaries, design, development, et cetera, 466 into profit. I guarantee a whole lot more percentage goes into profit and biz ops, and very little goes into COGS, but we don't know for sure. And then you divide this number by 3 because COGS, cost of goods sold, includes materials, labor, and shipping. And so $1.56, and again, absolute best case scenario, which means it's less than this. $1.56 for the materials of this. I'm estimating this shirt is at least 1.5 yards of fabric, 1/2 yard of elastic, 6 to 8 buttons. There's some interfacing and fusing in there. $1.56 for labor, which includes cutting of at least 8 pieces, assembly of those 8 cut pieces, cut and sewn, and then you have to press it, label it, pack it, etc., all for $1.56. And then $1.56 to ship it around the world because fashion is international. And I will say real quick, my kids are walking through the door, so I could have chaos, but I'm going to work through it. But they know I'm on a call, so $1.56 to get the fabric that was probably made in Vietnam, shipped over to China because this was imported, where it's manufactured, shipped to LA where it's warehoused. So ask yourself, $14 divided by 3, do a rounding, $15 divided by 3, you got $5. Divide that, but divided by 3. Does it make sense? It's too good to be true. Okay, someone had to make that. The material had, someone had to make profit on $1.56 for materials, right? So again, overproduction, where you want to liquidate your product, is the only way that this can happen. And does it make sense? So that's your math game that you can apply to any product that you purchase. And again, it's the best case scenario. This is because this was Fashion Nova, post-pandemic and post the new California laws, they've moved manufacturing overseas, but pre-pandemic and pre-2022 laws, they actually manufactured quite a bit in Los Angeles. And this is a New York Times article. I believe you can read it for free once, but then after that, it's blocked by a paid wall. But you can read it for free at least once. But it goes through this story of this woman here, who I believe her name is Miss Garcia, and her conditions and her way of life and the way this game, it's a game, the way this game works. It's a 2019 article, 4 years old now, but still relevant. Okay, these are some quotes from the article. The company did not deal directly with factories. Instead, it places bulk orders with companies that design the clothes and then ship fabrics to separately owned sewing contractors. Let me just reach and close my door. Okay. She worked every day of the week, on average $270 a week, the equivalent of $466 an hour. Do you know the minimum wage in LA? It's not $466, it's $16.81, I believe. Well, of course, that's what it's like in Bangladesh or Vietnam, but those are developing countries. People don't want to believe it happens right here. And here is the business model. This is how it works. Under federal law, if you can claim that you did not know that your workers are paid illegal wages, you can get away with it. That is absolutely the business model. California is working to change that. That's the business model here for fast fashion. That's the business model in Bangladesh for fast fashion. That's the business model everywhere for fast fashion. You put several layers of contracts and subcontractors between you, the brand, and the people who are actually sewing your clothes, and you can claim, oh, I didn't know. We don't own the sewing contractor. So whatever, hang on, let me move my windows so I can see this quote here. So whatever they pay, that's their problem. We assume they're paying their employees the minimum. All right. So this is how fast fashion works. And not only is it subcontractor under subcontractor, so it becomes very blurry and very veiled and very secretive, but also the rule of the game is hire people who can't speak up for themselves. And here in America, that is undocumented workers, because if you speak up for yourself, you might get deported. Okay, and in other countries, these are other immigrants or women and girls, people who have a harder time speaking up for themselves. Okay, so moving on. And then I hope someone on this call has at least heard of this documentary. It came out in 2007. It's the exact same story 10 years earlier. Fill in a different brand name. This is Forever 21. These women went to a garment worker center of LA and realized they had some rights, that they were being violated. And a documentary was made about their lives, about their experience for them. And it's about Forever 21, who played the exact same game of layers of subcontractors. And this documentary is available. It's out there. But again, just insert new brand name. The next new brand name is going to come up and play the same game. So this is the game. It was Forever 21 then, Fashion Nova and others now. That's how it works. Okay, so getting to the waste side of the problem. Here in LA, it's estimated that 6% of the total commercial waste stream and 2% of the recycled stream in the city of LA is textiles from commercial businesses and multifamily homes. But in individual single-family homes, that's a little harder to track for some reason. It's estimated to be the fifth most common material in the waste stream. And this report by the California Product Stewardship Council and LA City Sanitation, I'm happy that I contributed to this report. And then here in Los Angeles, because of the industry here, our waste is much higher than other cities like Sacramento and San Francisco, et cetera. It's great that the industry is here. The industry should be here, but that's why LA's is higher than the other cities. Okay, so here's some legislation. California is recognizing problems. In 2022, the Garment Worker Protection Act came out where it says, not only do you have to pay the hourly wage instead of the piece rate wage, but it works. It's not perfect, but it works to hold the manufacturers and the retailers accountable. But it's not perfect because you can see here that meant, that meant the contractor, manufacturers, and potentially the stores are all defendants in my claim and responsible for paying my wages. But there's a lot of loopholes in this because the manufacturers play a cat and mouse game. It takes a lot of money for them to they set up a business and then the business name on the checks of the workers changes every like 6 months, 3 to 6 months. So they will be employed and keep getting checks, but the name of the business who is paying them changes because the businesses are playing a cat and mouse game with the government. And that costs money. That's expensive. So they're choosing to put their money there instead of just, paying workers what they should be paid. So it's a pure choice of where they're choosing to put their money because it is not free to operate this way. You have to play the games with the government. And then this coming up 2023, but it's not passed yet. And California Product Stewardship Council is working on keeping it rolling and getting it passed, but this would be the Responsible Textile Recovery Act, which would put the producers, put responsibility on producers to have some responsibility for the waste that is generated. I must say, because I always say at this point, that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, because all of these laws are backed with good intentions, but unfortunately, California governs with stick and very minimal carrot when it comes to these things. And it does become hard as a small business to operate as a California business and remain compliant and do the things that you need and want to do to be an above board, well operating business. So I support the intention of these, but I honestly, I must say to this group, because you're legislative activists, I fear the execution of these, because so often it comes, California legislates for Fashion Nova, and then they treat everyone like they're Fashion Nova, basically, is kind of what we're getting at here. So there's a lot of people who are doing the right thing, but have a hard time with compliance in California. So it's a double-edged sword. Okay. What can you do about it? Oh my gosh, the doom and gloom. What can you do? Well, you can research. I can tell this group researches. A lot of people don't want to research, but you have to research. And you can repair, refit, redye, repurpose your clothes, all these wonderful R words, resell, rewear, thrift, recycle, and support brands who put transparency, equity, sustainability first. There's absolutely greenwashing out there, but if you work with brands who have sustainability and transparency and equity at the top of their marketing, there's a better chance that it's a brand we're supporting. And I do want to say on the supporting aspect, I am crowdfunding. We have a campaign on Indiegogo, but I am also raising money through grants, etc. But you can find this on my site, on our Instagram. Do you see the Indiegogo page? Did you follow me over? Okay. So anyway, we are working to acquire an electric truck that is a circular electric truck from a fellow Lacey portfolio company called Evo Electric that we will convert into our mobile circular fashion lab. And this will allow us to be mobile and just take our business model on the road. And we've already just become an approved vendor for LAUSD. So we'll start doing workshops for students through LAUSD. We are just to communities across LA County to bring our repair, redye services directly to them, to give you the opportunity to if you want to get rid of your clothes, but we can also help share with you how you can love those clothes again. If it's fast fashion, you just want to buy new, but you know, that is what it is. But if they're clothes that you love, you can repair them, you can redesign them, you can redye them if they're stained. And there's so many ways to keep loving the clothes that you already own, and to get all the new looks you want through redesign and redye without having to support fast fashion. So our goals here are to acquire the truck, and we're 60% of the way there. I know our crowdfunding campaign is a little on the low side, but I do have grant funding that I've secured. And so we're honestly like 65% of the way there to securing the truck. But it'll help set up our mobile workshop and do community outreach. And we do all sorts of events like these. And you can find this all over my website and Instagram. So I'll just leave it at that and probably open it up to questions.
Thank you, Karri. I just popped a link to that Indiegogo page into the chat. And Jessica, I invite you to do the same if there's any kind of action. As you can tell, we're all about action. We like to take action and support each other in that. So if there is something that you would like to point us to that would support either or both of your efforts, please feel free to pop that into the chat for everyone. So I'm just going to open open up the chat so that everyone on the call can please enter your question for our guests into the chat. And while you're doing that, Cheryl has a few questions that she's going to start us out with. So she's going to go ahead and kick it off. But please go ahead and add your own questions. Cheryl?
Okay, so first of all, Karri, I want to say thank you very much for touching on the workers. I was a costumer. I got paid union wages to do what those women do for a pittance. And it would make me sick every time I went into H&M or any of those stores and picked up a garment and saw how cheap it was and thought about how much work actually went into it. So I don't think people see, I think people see all the environmental problems of fashion, but they don't think about the environmental justice aspect. So thank you for that. I think Jessica, you and I have talked about this another time too. Anyhow, so our questions, let's start with, do you guys see a future for zero waste fashion? Jump in.
I think that there's not much in the world that I think is truly zero waste. And so that's like, it's hard to get there, particularly for something that has become more and more and more disposable over time. There's so much greater quantity of clothing as the quality has gone down. I think where I'm seeing some exciting things are in take back and in creative upcycling and reuse, a resurgence of thrift. I'm seeing more people look into rental options, which is also great. I know of a handful of companies that are working on fiber to fiber and are at least through the R&D phase, but still aren't ready to take real volume where it's like industry changing. And so I would like to think it's possible. Even just in the patterning and sewing of clothing, it can be really difficult if you're constructing the garment for actual wear and not just for a senior thesis or a runway. So yeah, zero waste is a really high bar, but better and more sustainable and less wasteful, I think is definitely doable.
Yeah, I completely agree. We're in a race against fast fashion. Prices keep coming down, and it is hard to say no to a $14 really awesome. I have a saying, your cocktail dress should not cost less than the cocktail you're going to drink that evening. But unfortunately, it does. And we have to compete against those low prices. It's commoditized. And I think legislation is a way to even the playing field. But you're right, there is no true zero waste. There's always some waste, but waste to one is a resource to another. So that just means the fluid transfer of materials and finding where materials need to go is a great solution for that.
Okay, so next question. How do you tell? How does a consumer tell if a brand is sustainable or sustainable-ish?
Karri,
I would
do you
look
wanna
at the
start?
label. If it says, unfortunately, this is nothing against the developing countries of the world, but if the governments don't set higher standards for those developing countries, the corporations will absolutely take advantage of it. And if it says made in Bangladesh, made in Cambodia, that's where the labor's the cheapest because they're not setting higher standards. And that's where you go if you want the rock bottom prices. So I would look at the label. Of course, there's lots and lots of greenwashing out there, and there is no yes, no check mark box that you can check. So I would look at the journalistic articles about a company, because journalists do tell the truth more than the brands themselves. And that can be a way to weed through greenwashing.
Karri, totally agree. I think, unfortunately, price tends to be a big indicator as well. Like you mentioned with your Fashion Nova example, or your cocktail line, I think is really good. Usually, if something is going to be well made and made to last with good materials and properly pay everyone along the supply chain, it's not possible for $12 to $15 a piece. I think I do think there's a lot of companies that are focused on being made in America, which is a start, and then on natural materials, which is good. Yeah, most of the time companies, what I'm seeing now in all of the companies that we work with, they realize the marketing potential of sustainability. And so most companies are going to try and find anything that they can in their business model to point to and say, this is what we're doing that's sustainable. And so it requires a little bit more digging to see how factual that claim is, but also how the company can back it up.
Okay, I'm going to jump to questions here, and hopefully I'm not missing anything.
Yeah. Cheryl, I see Tara asked the question, does your company provide redesign to individuals or teach us to do it ourselves? Is there any connection like that?
Yeah, that's my business model. We're definitely looking to get a few more B2B and B2G contracts, but direct to consumer is where we're at. Absolutely, redesign as a service. We're the only company I know of that offers that as a service. And then we also have products like denim repair kit at home, and like at home natural dyeing with flowers that that's not our product, but we wholesaled that from another brand. So yeah, we do that.
Good. And Martha asked, do either of the speakers see a role for robotics in the production side of this industry? One idea would be training the workers and managing the robotic production.
There's a few interesting things that I've seen in robotics in the last couple of years. On the waste side, one of the important things in pre-consumer and post-consumer textile recycling is that all sorting still happens by hand. So if you are donating to a local nonprofit, if you're putting it in a clothing bin on the street, even the sorting that we do at Fab Scrap, if it's going to be recycled or reused in any way, that's probably happening by human hand. There's a couple companies that are trying to automate that process. And so some of it is optical sorting, some of it is mechanical sorting. So there's some interesting things in robotics on that end. And then on the production side, there is a little bit around zero waste patterning, but also 3D patterning, so that you can start to try and model the fabric on a form online, from what I understand, and see drape, etc. It's been years since I've seen a demo. I'm hoping that it's come a long way. But yeah, that's where I've seen some new work on both sides.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that. The reason why you can fully automate the manufacture of a car, but not a textile, is it's floppy. It has no structure, and robots can't handle this floppiness, basically. They can handle like a rigid car door. There absolutely is automation happening and trying to happen to figure out how robots can get over the fluidity and floppiness of textiles, but it's very early stage. A lot of those are being tested out in the Bangladesh factories alongside the workers, so the workers can see their future of job replacement. I am for automation, and yeah, with the prototyping digital design, that allows us to do as much digitally before we have to make those samples, and so we can avoid the sample prototypes that Jessica has to deal with, so that you do as much on the computer, and then when you believe you've done it as much as possible, then you make the sample. So there's a lot there. And then instead of mass production, instead of make, sell, it's sell, then make, is a business model. And that's manufacture on demand and made to order. So you put the idea out there and you get the sale, and then you make it, instead of speculating mass production of a whole bunch of products and then marking them down when they don't sell.
That sort of coincides with a question from Jeannie Lewis. Should we be buying new clothing at all? I mean, it seems like there's so much out there that we just should repurpose what's out there. And but I don't know.
Yeah, I saw in the comment, what is the most poly? What is the most eco material to buy? Cotton, rayon? I would say any of them, as long as it's already in existence, because if it's already in existence, the pollution has already been spent. And I mean, a polyester garment is more, that's reused and bought secondhand, is way more sustainable than a brand new cotton garment. So something that already exists is the most sustainable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's probably the most affordable too for quality. I think there's so many more options now for secondhand than existed even like 10 years ago. Online platforms and more thrift stores, at least in New York City, there's a lot more thrift infrastructure. So yeah, I think in buying new, it should be something that you plan to keep for years and years. I think there's something like the average garment is only worn like 5 to 6 times. I don't know, Karri, you might know that stat better than I do. And so I think anything that you plan to wear consistently over time and is made to be worn that many times and last that many times, and you can properly care for it, I think the care is the other piece, because then that helps it retain its life if you choose to donate it. Yeah.
Cool.
There's a couple people who asked about if there is something comparable to Fab Scrap here in LA, and you've kind of answered in the chat, but maybe you can speak to that.
Sure. The long version of that answer is in 2020, we spent most of January and some of February in LA, and we had found warehouse space and started to interview potential team. And right before we signed the lease in February, well, right before we signed the lease, I guess this was a little while later, but March 2020 happened and everything shut down. The funding that we had to open in LA is what kept us open through 2020 and 2021. So LA was put on pause, but then we received sponsorship to open a second location in Philadelphia at the end of 2021, really 2022. And we learned a lot from that expansion. A little bit easier being all on the same coast, like a car ride away. We learned a lot from that expansion. And so what we're hoping to do is return to our plans for LA, but have the industry sponsor it. The Philadelphia location was sponsored by the Urban group of brands, Urban Outfitters, Free People, Anthropologie, and Nuuly. Their parent company, Urban, helped us fundraise and sponsored our Philly location because that's where their headquarters are. And Karri, like you mentioned, there's so many brands who have their headquarters in LA that we'd like to have the industry sponsor a Fab Scrap LA location. That's the overarching goal. Obviously, we are fundraising too from individual donations. I think we'll return at full steam to that in 2025. But yeah, we had all of the plans there. We have a wait list of brands in LA who are holding material. They don't want to ship it, which good. I'd rather wait till we have the solution set up locally. But we have a wait list of about 100 brands in LA who are ready to start service as soon as we can get there.
Fantastic. It's good that you guys are like connecting on the call too. That's terrific. Cheryl?
So Diane, I think Polly's question, which is kind of one of my questions too, about legislation. what legislation could be done to help. But Polly asks, I got to put on my glasses. Can Karri speak, or both of you speak more to the issue of California legislation? I understood her to be saying that the laws assume all clothes manufacturers are forever 21, and thus making it hard for, quote, good companies to be in business here. If this is true, what can be done? What carrots could California be given? And then, oh, somebody already asked that about what fabric. So legislation.
I am not directly involved with legislation, but I am very well connected with the California Product Stewardship Council, and that's their whole plan is they advocate for legislation. And what I think they can do more than anything is involve the industry itself in what makes sense and ask questions of the people who are on the ground. Because oftentimes it seems like a few big players are in the room. And for example, California, with pre-pandemic, the law came out of employee versus contractor because of Lyft and Uber. And so California did this broad sweep of you have to be an employee. And then it seriously affected all the film production studios because they were very contract based because you work on a product or a project and you're not 100% employed all year round with that company. And it became incredibly complicated to have a project of a film where you want contractors when California was telling you you have to have employees. And so I just think they need to do a little more due diligence and maybe also have more carrots involved and have all the compliance and penalties and fees and fines come into play when a violation is determined, not from the beginning.
Jessica, anything in New York?
Nothing in New York. The Fabric Act that I mentioned, which is, I believe, going to Congress or the House. Sorry. The legislative half of things is not it's not my strong suit. But the other piece of policy that I think is really interesting is in France. They moved forward with legislation about the number of fibers that can be in a fabric to aid in recycling and help reduce waste. And so I think as more legislation happens around textiles and sustainability in the EU, a lot of that is going to start to move to the US and trickle down.
Yeah, there's somebody who has just come up with a way to separate polycotton, which would be an amazing help. So I could see how limiting the number of fibers in the fabric would be great.
Yeah. I would like to add to that real quick, though. Fiber blends come about because of useful properties. For example, polycotton came about because poly makes cotton wrinkle less, and so it solved the problem. And these fiber blends aren't just there to make life difficult. They're there actually to solve functional properties and provide benefits. And so like there's this guy who is a t-shirt manufacturer, and he was like, everyone's telling me I have to go natural, but I have made a polyester t-shirt that never fades, that never stretches, that you can wear forever. I've washed it umpteen times and it still looks brand new. And I was like, that's probably the more sustainable alternative than cotton. You have to look at the end use case and what properties and benefits these fibers bring, and not just assume natural fibers are always the best one. So it's complicated.
Somebody mentioned a couple of times about, well, one is, are there any new textiles that have a lower environmental footprint that you're excited about, and mentioned seaweed fiber? And then I think somebody else mentioned that they saw a sweater made from seaweed. Is that a real thing? Is that?
I hate to be like so negative, but some of these new fabrics like kind of frustrate me because I okay, we're making leather out of pineapple and there's like mushroom fabrics and I guess they're like seaweed fabrics. But like, why can't we just make fabric out of fabric? Like, why are we diverting our attention into things that, like Karri, you were saying, definitely won't have the performance that we're expecting? I don't know what you're going to smell like after wearing a seaweed sweater all day. Like, they're not going to have the wear that we're expecting. And so I think it's a diversion, honestly, from some of the bigger issues.
Great, great. Well, we are sort of coming to time, and I'm just sensitive to the fact that we've got one of our speakers is on the East Coast. Cheryl, do you have any? We did have a question from Andy and regarding a connection between oil and natural gas industry looking to expand their markets and the rise of fast fashion. But I know you guys have said that you're not so much into the legislative thing. I don't know if that's something you look at, if that was part of your figures or not, but
I mean, more and more fabric, I think, is moving in the synthetic direction, and so it makes sense. Like, I haven't seen any studies or like direct numbers about this, but it makes sense to me.
great. So Cheryl, I'll turn it back to you. Do you have any final questions for our guests?
Oh God, there's so many questions here.
Covered a lot of them.
Yeah,
Bamboo related textiles. I don't
yeah.
know.
And Brigida is asking about how to maintain your clothing and stuff like that. Honestly, offhand, I would just say wash gently, cold, hang dry, treat it as nicely as possible. And I had a European mother. I was taught to buy good, buy classic, keep it for a long, long time. And if you reweaving, I just wanted to throw reweaving in there as an option. If you have good clothing and all of a sudden you've got moth holes or something like that, in cities like Los Angeles and New York City, you can find reweavers who can repair those things and give extended life to things. Ladies, anything you want to add?
I would just say repair, regift, cut it up and make it into something new. Diana, that 1980s jumpsuit you mentioned, there are no trends anywhere anymore. Where would you want? There are
We
no
can bring
trends.
them back, right?
Yeah.
Bring back
And be fun and be creative.
Sounds great. Yeah, this was such an interesting conversation to hear from you both from slightly different perspectives, and yet about the the same bigger topic. So thank you both so much. I know you put it into the chat. We're going to be on the call for another 10 minutes doing announcements. So if you would like to add or refresh those links of how we can, either find you or support you, and since we are involved in legislation, please reach out to us. Let this be the beginning of an ongoing connection relationship. And if there is a way that we can support the work you're doing through visibility or, as I said, legislative support, please let us know. Okay. This has been great fun. Thank you both so much. And this is where we like to ask people to turn on their microphones and just go, woohoo, thank you. So feel free, everybody on the call, to do that, to unmute.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Hello.
you.
Thank
So
you.
much.
you
Very
so
informative.
much.
Thank
You
you. It
guys.
was very informative.
Some Zoom love,
you.
And good jobs that you're both doing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's not, yeah, isn't it nice to know that they're out there doing that? And I also want to thank Cheryl for coordinating
Yes,
and
thank you, Cheryl.
producing this program tonight.